Right between us, yes, right in here. Today we're very, very pleased to have Kaia Rolle's grandmother with us. Marilyn Kirkland has been a fearless advocate for her granddaughter, and we will be so honored and grateful that she's taking her time today. I guarantee you the message she's got to send is important. We also have with us, one second here, one second. Yes, Jen? What's that? I'm in front of the podium right now, I'm talking. You got it, bye. Okay, so anyway, Marilyn Kirkland's with us. Ali Kamalzadeh is our local counsel. We want to thank him. And we want to thank, of course, Bacardi Jackson, who will speak after me. So it'll be myself, Bobby DiCello, followed by Bacardi, who's here with us today from the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm from the law firm of DiCello Levitt. That's D-I, capital C-E-L-L-O-L-E-V-I-T-T. And my first name, Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, DiCello. Following my comments, it'll be Bacardi, followed by Marilyn Kirkland, and then, of course, your questions or thoughts as we wrap it up. Okay. Today, we have filed an amended lawsuit, an amended complaint on behalf of Kaia Rolle. And we bring this lawsuit today on behalf of her constitutional rights and her need for safety and her need to be recognized and her dignity to be recognized here in the state of Florida and across the country. Because this is a pending matter, I cannot and will not comment any more about the case, and I want to remind everyone that both sides to this dispute have an opportunity for a fair process, and we don't want to do anything to insinuate that process should be undermined today. However, we will be talking about the political and social background that necessitated the original filing of this lawsuit, as well as the amendments that are contained in the filing. It is tragic. It is devastating to the Rolle family what happened. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you that according to USA Today, there have been over 2,600 other families across the country that have suffered in this way. There are 2,600 other families that have seen young children, sometimes in states with no minimum age of arrest, being dealt the horrible reality of incarceration or handcuffing at the hands of law enforcement. It is our mission today to announce to the United States, and indeed this state, that we gather here to ensure that all children have an opportunity to be protected from that kind of experience. We're calling upon this state to raise its minimum arrest age. And while we are very grateful for the hard work of the legislators and many who are here with me right now today in getting a minimum age established, and while I remember the fact that there once was no minimum age of arrest, 7 is just too young. And so we are going to continue to fight for a greater number of years that a child must live before they have to live with an arrest. I know that Bacardi Jackson from the Southern Poverty Law Center has many ideas about that policy concern and the facts and circumstances behind it, and she will be filling in those blanks for me. And Marilyn will be telling you her reasons for wanting to see that age, that number here in the state of Florida to go up. Also, we're going to be asking every state in the United States to set a minimum age, and 7 is not the number. 12 or higher is a starting place. 12 or higher is a starting point. I remind us that other countries like Scotland and Australia have fought for these changes and have done the work that we need to do. So ours is a message of hope for those families that have been damaged in the way that Kaia's family has been damaged. And you'll hear from Marilyn exactly how that and what that's looked like. And as I wrap up my comments, I want to say what an honor it is to represent young Kaia. There was a day at her house when we gathered, and I learned that she used to dance in the airport here in Orlando, just for strangers. She'd sing for them the song Frozen to total strangers. And today, if she saw a police officer standing on that corner near that tree, she wouldn't get out of her car. And there's so much more that I wish I could say, but cannot say about how this has destroyed her, ruined her, and her spirit. My mother taught me that when I had just gotten married and decided to have children, she said, "There's one thing I want you to always remember, Bobby." She said, "I always want you to remember, do nothing to harm the spirit of your child. You can get mad at him, you can get angry, you'll make mistakes, but do nothing to harm the spirit of your child." And so we are here for all of the children to ensure that their spirits are not hurt. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you so much for the invitation to stand here today with Ms. Kirkland and with Kaia. I am the Deputy Legal Director of the Children's Rights Advocacy and Litigation team at the Southern Poverty Law Center and for the SPLC Action Fund. And our organizations are here today once again to stand with and applaud the courage of Marilyn Kirkland and her granddaughter Kaia Rolle. When I had the honor of first meeting Ms. Kirkland, it was to introduce proposed legislation to enact the first ever minimum age of arrest bill in the state of Florida. I imagine all of us who saw the footage of Kaia's traumatizing and callous arrest were sickened by the scene of a child begging to be heard, begging to be seen, begging to be helped, and most of all, begging for her life not to be permanently altered. I know I certainly was, and it moved us to act. It took 2 years and 2 legislative sessions for the Kaia Rolle Act to finally pass. And even then, it's been gutted to leave without protection hundreds of thousands of other precious children. And within just a year, Kaia herself. Somehow our state leaders could not imagine a Florida in which we could find our state on par with the United Nations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine, the American Bar Association, the National Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Center, states around the country, countries around the globe, and so many other advocates in our understanding that children under 14 should not be unjustly treated like adults because life has not yet given them the experiences to form the criminal intent or possess the mental capacity and competency to have the same level of culpability. And it will neither serve us or them to impose the harsh, life-altering consequences of arrest and prosecution. So I am here as an advocate giving thanks to Ms. Kirkland and Kaia for their strength and their fortitude. But I'm also here as a mother of 3 with a heart of gratitude because I and each of my children know there but the grace of God go they. Like I imagine most parents of black children, I don't get a great deal of comfort by the proliferation of police on my children's campuses. It was just a couple of years ago when I learned about a threat to my son's middle school, and parents were notified, the security was heightened, police were on the scene, helicopters were flying above, it looked like a war zone. And while I certainly as a parent, understand the fear all of us feel when we hear about such a threat. What loomed larger for me, however, was the possibility that my son would be caught in the crossfires and misperceptions of what exactly a criminal looks like. I had him stay home not because I feared the threat would be actualized, but because of the justified fear of a policed planet. I know there's no comfort for any parent who's lost a child, and certainly statistics don't provide any kind of salve to their hurt. But on the whole, I also know public schools are some of the safest places our children should be, especially as it relates to criminal violence. A 2018 Washington Post article talked about a 1 in 614 million chance of a child being killed by a gunman in a public school. But on the other side, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that my black sons will be shot in their lifetimes by police. So I, like many parents, find no comfort in the over-policing of our schools. My sons and daughters, and like many black children, don't feel safe when they have to interact with police, and especially after traumatizing events and seeing on the news things that happened like what happened to Kaia. Even beyond the risk of being shot and killed is the risk that our black children face in having to have their privacy, their liberty, and their civil rights violated and their education disrupted. Nationwide, black students make up about 15% of the public school enrollment, but they are a third of law enforcement referrals. In Orlando, in 2017, the last date that CRDC data is available, black youth were just over 25% of the student population, but 47.1% of in-school suspensions, 50.8% of out-of-school suspensions, 45.1% of expulsions, and nearly 40% of law enforcement referrals. And across the state of Florida, another similar phenomenon of racial disparities in the nearly 35,000 children that we commit to involuntary psychiatric detention and examination. A very similar process where children are handcuffed and put in the back of police cars and sent to receiving facilities. Traumatizing, life-altering. So something is amiss. It's epidemic, it's systemic, and it's ubiquitous. As we look at all of the climate and the culture that's happening in our schools, the attacks on our schools, we know this cannot stand. We know we have to call on our political leaders to do something different. We can have a different Florida. We, as the people of Florida, get to decide what that looks like. So we are here today with a message that the militarization over policing, defunding, destabilization of our schools, when we can't even fund the minimum levels of mental health services that children like Kaia would have benefited from, but instead we fund policing and militarization and criminalization. We can do something different. So we call on our leaders of courage to amend the Kaia Rolle Act and raise the minimum age of arrest to at least 14. We call on our administrators and school districts to have the courage to create learning environments that don't relegate the history and humanity of black children. And we call on parents to be advocates and allies of our children, to demand fully funded, culturally responsive, inclusive public schools that are truly safe for all of our children. And before I close, I just want to add that it wasn't easy to get here as a mother of 3 this morning, coming from South Florida. But when Ms. Kirkland called and asked me if I would stand with her, a woman who I regard with the courage and strength of a Mamie Till, who looked at her own child's pain and bruises and said, no, not another one. Never again another one. A woman who has her own personal life obstacles, but who has never, ever wavered in her advocacy to protect all children because she saw what it did to her own. And that is the kind of courage and conviction that we all must have. So it is a pleasure to stand here with you, Ms. Kirkland. It is my honor, and I hope that you will listen to her words and understand how critical it is that today we decide is the day that we will lean towards justice.
Well said, well said. introduce the family who's been gathered with you before you begin?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, and I wanted to say thank you very much for being here with us to help us continue this journey. My daughter, Jamie Rolle, Kaia's mom, is here with me. My son, Javon, Kaia's uncle, my sister, Patricia White, is here with me. The reason they're here with me because what happened to our family is a community, a family, a village issue. It is not a Kaia issue. It is not a Maryland issue. When this incident first happened, when our journey began on September the 19th of 2019, my goal was to deal with the criminal aspects of what happened to Kaia. I knew within every fiber of my being that what was going on with her was wrong. But my first concern was the criminal aspect. And then it set in all of the fallout from that act. The fallout was physical to Kaia and to the family. It was emotional to Kaia and to the family. And people don't understand, it is also greatly financial. It has a financial aspect to that child and the family. And as we lived this for the past 4 years, as we got entrenched in this, I realized that what we are going through, but by the grace of God, the support of my family, and the village that was created for Kaia after this incident, but for that, we would not have survived it. So it put me in mind of other children and other families that would have endured this and maybe did not have the resilience or the resources or the know-how to fight this and were suffering in silence. And after seeing the destruction it wrought on Kaia and my family, I made it a personal goal. Me, who was only known as Grandma, who cooked, who looked after the grandchildren, who kept house, who kept her family happy and together, decided that I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. Simply because if there is any way I can prevent even a handful, even one other child from suffering what Kaia suffered and one other family from enduring what our family endured, I would feel good about it. There is no way a minimum age for arrest at age 7 can be allowed to stand. When we started this journey, Kaia was 6. When we had the Kaia Rolle Act passed, Kaia was 7. 7 months after that law was passed, Kaia aged out of the law that was named after her. She became 8. She's now 10 years old. So the law that we fought so hard to put in place doesn't even afford her, the child that it's named after, any protection. Our children are supposed to be loved, nurtured, protected. We all know if our child falls and scrapes their knee or bumps their toes, it hurts us. We hurt with that child. So the pain and the anguish of watching what Kaia has had to endure has made it my life's mission that the minimum age for arrest must be raised. States that have no minimum age for arrest must implement them. And we must all, as a village, do the utmost we could to protect our children, to love them, to nurture them, and to insulate them from incidences like this. These should not happen. Again, I am really grateful to our community because they're what helped us through this and are continuing to help us through this because we have been advised by her medical providers that this is a lifelong mission of recovery for Kaia. It's not something that ended 6 months or a year later. She is forced to live with this for the rest of her life. So I am very grateful to the community who stepped up to the plate to help my family and I get through this. Thank you.
Okay, could you go to my bag? Find it. As we wrap up the press conference, I want to thank Marilyn for her powerful words and the family gathered here with me. Come over here, guys. Getting close. Bring it all in, bring it all in. Just to say thank you to them and the courage that these folks have shown. Bacardi, thank you for your powerful message today. You have been an absolute beacon in the minds and hearts of this family, and you need to know that the Southern Poverty Law Center's work was a main reason why we chose to get involved. The beacon that you've been in this space and the leadership that you've shown here has been invaluable, so thank you so very, very much. For Bacardi. And Bacardi, get in close here too. You've been with this family as long as anybody from day one. So get in. I want to show you some pictures. Just to remind you of what happened that day. This happened.
Handcuffed behind her back.
And this is happening all over America. Babies, children, are being treated like this. I've never seen in my entire life as a former prosecutor or as a civil rights attorney or a human rights attorney, for that matter a father, or for that matter a human being, I've never seen a child with their hands bound at the age of 6, walked out by a man that's 3 times the size of her to a police car that waits off in the distance because she had a tantrum. And I speak in this regard to the public record that's existing as we speak today. These are objectively known facts. I urge the media, all of you, each one of you, to find it in your heart to talk to this department and ask, in fact, demand an explanation as to whether they're going to support a minimum age of 14 in this state. When I was raised in the white suburbs outside of Cleveland, I never had the slightest idea of what I've learned through my journeys as a civil rights attorney. And I've listened to Bacardi, I've listened to Marilyn. And I urge all of my white friends and all of you who are in power to listen very carefully to the words of those who are living a different reality of law enforcement. I have been criticized for standing in moments like this with people like this. And I mean people who are victims of a system that doesn't recognize their dignity. We are all brothers and sisters, neighbors, and Americans. And so when I was in the suburbs, I never imagined a moment like this. A moment where the police officer is telling me why my 6-year-old, or why I as a 6-year-old, would have to sit in a police car and go to the Juvenile Justice Center for a tantrum. This has to stop. The face of law enforcement should never gaze upon a child as an object to be transported with handcuffs or wrist ties. They should gaze at a child the way we all do. Those of us who care, those of us who love, those of us who know what it's like to be loved. We should gaze upon them with compassion. We should gaze upon them with an idea that they have dignity, and a dignity which will be defended both by this law firm and this family, and by that law firm from now until the laws change across this country. A new minimum age must be set. One that protects the rights, the dignity, and even, yes, the spirit of the children that are living among you and I right now. It's been my honor and pleasure to be here, and thank you for letting me show you these pictures and speak on behalf of the family. I'll take questions. Yes? 14. I misspoke when I said the word 12. Number 12. I apologize. The lawsuit is chiefly against the department and the officers involved. And to the extent that I can talk, we have followed the procedure here that the courts allow. There's a time issue that we have to abide by in terms of when we make these amendments, and so we've made amendments based on the investigation that we've conducted. Sure. The counts spell out a couple things. One, that Kaia, on the day she was arrested, was subjected. I'll do that again. That she was subjected to excessive force on the day she was arrested by law enforcement. And that count number two is that she was subjected to a false arrest, which means arrest without probable cause. And the reason why we know it was, or why we are asserting it was a false arrest, is evident in the videos that have been made public and that have been spread all over this country. Count three alleges malicious prosecution, which is a prosecution without probable cause. That is to say, after you charge the child for committing a crime, when she was having a tantrum, you proceed to assert charges against her, which sounded in the charge of battery here in the state of Florida. Our fourth count is supervisory liability under Title 42 U.S.C. 1983, which alleges that the supervisors involved bear responsibility for what I've just spoken about. Our fifth count is a claim against the city itself for keeping a policy that undermines the Constitution. And what we mean by that is, and it's stated here in the complaint, that there are policies in place that allowed officers who are not experienced or well-trained to handle children. And so it's no wonder that they get treated poorly. Until the state of Florida demands and sets standards in place that make some kind of reasonable nod to the fact that they're handling children, we fear this kind of thing will continue as well. Count six is parental loss of filial consortium, and that count is essentially a count that speaks to the loss of the spirit of this child, which is explored by and experienced by her mother and her grandparents and family. Thank you. Yes. What was it? So you're asking what was it like for them to see that video for the first time? Do you want to speak to that?
Yes. And unfortunately, it may seem really brief, but there is only one word that sums it up. It was horrific for us. It took us 3 weeks to see that video in its entirety. We started it, we were unable to cope with what we were seeing, and it took us 3 weeks. It was horrific for us.
Let's summarize that very briefly because this is the evidence for the court.
Kaia is no longer the Kaia that we know. She is no longer the Kaia, but Kaia is a fighter. So she continues to fight. She continues to tell us she wants to have her old life back. She continues to tell us that she wants to be the old Kaia. And she fights as best she could.
Any other questions? We are asking for monetary compensation. It's stated in the complaint as an amount that is in excess of $1 million, but more importantly, it's to satisfy some of the jurisdictional requirements that we have to satisfy. Certainly, this family deserves everything and more to support a child who's been ruined as Kaia has for her life. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all.